My name is Sebastian, I'm 38 years old, and I thought I knew my wife Cecilia better than anyone. We've been married for 12 years, living in a quiet suburb of Denver, Colorado. I work as a mechanical engineer at a local plant, she's a nurse at the hospital. It seemed like ordinary American family life. But what happened 5 months ago changed everything. And how I decided to respond to her betrayal? Well, let's just say she definitely didn't expect it. It all started with a chance encounter with Jennifer, my childhood friend. We hadn't seen each other since college, almost 18 years. She moved to Denver because of her husband's job, who got a position at a big corporation. Jennifer had always been special to me. In high school we were inseparable, but life took us to different cities. When I saw her at the mall that day, my heart started beating faster. She had barely changed, the same chestnut curls, the same charming smile. We agreed to have coffee the following week, supposedly just as old friends. But you know how it goes. One coffee turned into lunch, lunch into walks in the park. Jennifer told me her marriage was going through tough times. Her husband Michael was constantly on business trips, paid little attention to the family. And I felt alive next to her for the first time in years. After 2 months, our meetings became regular. Nothing serious happened at first, just conversations, memories, laughter. But gradually what we had in school reappeared between us. That special closeness, that understanding without words. Cecilia didn't suspect anything. She was too busy with her own affairs, hospital shifts, meetings with friends. Jennifer and I met at a small cafe on the other side of town, went to movies and shopping centers where none of our acquaintances would see us. And then something happened that I hadn't planned. Jennifer kissed me after one of our lunches. Just like that, by her car in the parking lot. And I didn't push her away. Moreover, I responded to that kiss. The next 3 months became the most difficult in my life. I was torn between guilt towards Cecilia and the happiness I felt with Jennifer. We started meeting more often, even spending time at her house when Michael was on his regular business trips. I understood it was wrong, but I couldn't stop. Jennifer brought back the feeling of who I used to be, cheerful, young, in love. With Cecilia, our life had become routine, predictable. We lived like apartment roommates, not like a married couple. Then I made a fatal mistake. During one of our meetings in the park, I photographed Jennifer by the fountain. She was laughing, the wind was blowing her hair, the sun was illuminating her face. It was so beautiful that I didn't have time to think about the consequences. The photo remained on my phone. And a few more shots from our meetings that I took discreetly. I looked at them when I missed Jennifer between our dates. 2 weeks ago, Cecilia asked for my phone to call her mom. Her battery had died. I gave it to her without any suspicion. But she didn't just make a call. She started looking through photos, apparently searching for some old pictures for the family album. And she found what she was looking for. But not what she expected. That evening, Cecilia behaved strangely. She was too nice, too attentive. She cooked my favorite dinner, asked about work, even suggested watching a movie together. But I could see something cold and calculating in her eyes. The next morning she announced that she was going on a 3-day business trip to Seattle. Supposedly for professional development, some important seminar for nurses. I didn't suspect anything suspicious. She had such business trips before. Cecilia left on Monday morning. I drove her to the airport, kissed her goodbye. She smiled, but there was some coldness in her look that I didn't understand then. Tuesday evening I called Jennifer. I said Cecilia was on a business trip and invited her to my place. We could finally spend a whole evening together without hiding, without looking over our shoulders. Jennifer arrived at 8. We ordered Chinese food, opened a bottle of wine, sat on the couch, watched an old movie. Everything was so natural, so right. For the first time in many months I felt truly happy. Around 10, Jennifer put her head on my shoulder. We talked about our childhood, about how our lives could have turned out if we hadn't separated after school. She said she had often thought about me all these years. And then we heard the sound of a key in the lock. At first I thought it was a mistake. Maybe the neighbors got the wrong door. But then Cecilia appeared in the hallway with a suitcase in her hand and a facial expression I'll never forget. She stood in the living room doorway and looked at us. At me and Jennifer, who were sitting in each other's arms on the couch. Several seconds of absolute silence passed. Then Cecilia quietly said, "Now I know everything." Jennifer jumped up from the couch, started babbling something about this not being what it looked like, that she would leave right now. But Cecilia raised her hand, stopping her. "No need to explain anything, Jennifer. I understood everything when I saw your photos on Sebastian's phone. This business trip didn't exist. I specifically said I was traveling to check my suspicions. I felt the ground disappearing from under my feet. Cecilia had planned everything. She knew about our meetings and set this trap to catch us red-handed. Jennifer silently took her purse and headed for the exit. Before leaving, she turned and looked at me with pity. "I'm sorry, Sebastian," she said quietly and disappeared behind the door. Cecilia and I were left face to face. She sat in the chair opposite me, crossed her arms, and looked silently for a long time. Then she spoke in a calm, cold voice. 12 years, Sebastian. 12 years I thought I knew you. Thought I could trust you. And you've been meeting her behind my back all this time." I tried to say something but she wouldn't let me speak. "No need to make excuses. I've seen enough. Photos, your constant delays at work, new habits. I'm not stupid, Sebastian. I just didn't want to believe what I was seeing." The next few hours became the worst in my life. We talked, screamed, cried. Cecilia demanded explanations. I tried to justify myself, talking about my feelings, about how we had grown apart over the recent years. But she didn't want to hear anything. For her, everything was clear. I had betrayed, I had broken our marriage, I had destroyed the trust that had been built over years. In the morning, Cecilia announced her decision. She wanted a divorce. Immediately. Without attempts to fix everything, without family therapy, without second chances. "I can't live with a husband I don't trust," she said. "And I don't want to try to restore what's already broken." In the first days, I thought this was an emotional reaction, that over time she would change her mind. But Cecilia was determined. She moved to her sister's place, hired a lawyer, and filed for divorce. I tried to contact Jennifer, but she didn't answer my calls. Her phone was turned off, and when I came to her house, neighbors said she and her husband had urgently moved to another city. But what I didn't know then was that Cecilia's revenge was just beginning. What she had planned went far beyond a simple divorce. She was methodical, calculating, and absolutely ruthless in her approach to destroying not just our marriage, but my entire life as I knew it. The first sign that something more was happening came 3 days after our confrontation. I received a call at work from my supervisor, asking me to come to his office immediately. When I arrived, he had a serious expression and closed the door behind me. "Sebastian, I need to ask you about some allegations that have come to our attention," he said, sitting behind his desk. "There are concerns about your conduct and reliability." It turned out that someone had contacted my company's human resources department, providing detailed information about my affair. They painted a picture of an employee who was unreliable, dishonest, and engaged in behavior that reflected poorly on the company. While having an affair wasn't technically grounds for termination, the way it was presented made me look like someone who couldn't be trusted with important projects or sensitive information. I was removed from the major project I'd been leading for 6 months and reassigned to mundane tasks. My reputation at the company was damaged, and I could feel my colleagues looking at me differently. But Cecilia wasn't done. The next week, I discovered that she had been systematically contacting people in our social circle, telling them about my infidelity. But she wasn't just sharing the facts, she was crafting a narrative that made me look like a predator who had pursued a vulnerable married woman. According to Cecilia's version, I had deliberately sought out Jennifer, knowing she was in a troubled marriage, and manipulated her into an affair. She painted me as someone who had been planning this betrayal for months, someone who had coldly calculated how to destroy 2 marriages for my own selfish desires. Our mutual friends began avoiding me. Invitations to social gatherings stopped coming. When I tried to explain my side of the story, people were polite but distant. Cecilia had gotten to them first, and her version was more compelling because she was the victim. Then came the financial warfare. Cecilia had always handled our joint finances, and I discovered she had been preparing for this moment longer than I realized. She had quietly moved money from our joint accounts into accounts solely in her name. When I tried to access our savings, I found that most of it was gone. Her lawyer was aggressive and well prepared. They had documentation of every expense related to my affair. The restaurant bills, movie tickets, even the gas I'd used driving to meet Jennifer. They calculated the total amount of marital funds I had wasted on my infidelity and demanded that I compensate Cecilia for every penny. But the most devastating blow came when I discovered what she had done to my relationship with my family. Cecilia had called my mother, my sister, and my brother, tearfully telling them about my betrayal. She presented herself as the devastated wife who had tried everything to save the marriage, while I was the heartless husband who had thrown away 12 years for a meaningless fling. When I called my mother to explain, she was cold and disappointed. "I raised you better than this, Sebastian," she said. "That poor woman gave you the best years of her life, and this is how you repay her?" My sister refused to speak to me entirely. My brother listened to my side of the story but remained skeptical. "Even if things weren't perfect with Cecilia," he said, Cheating wasn't the answer. You should have talked to her or gotten counseling. The isolation was crushing. I felt like I was living in a nightmare where everyone I cared about had turned against me. Cecilia had systematically dismantled my support system, leaving me with no one to turn to. Meanwhile, she was playing the role of the grieving widow perfectly. She joined a support group for betrayed spouses and became very active on social media, sharing inspirational quotes about overcoming betrayal and finding strength. She received an outpouring of sympathy and support from friends, family, and even strangers who heard her story. The divorce proceedings were brutal. Cecilia's lawyer argued that I should receive minimal assets because my infidelity had caused the breakdown of the marriage. They presented evidence of my deceptive behavior and argued that I couldn't be trusted to fairly divide our property. I had to sell my car to afford a decent lawyer, but even then I was outmaneuvered at every turn. Cecilia had been planning this for months, maybe even years. She had kept meticulous records of everything: our income, expenses, assets, and debts. She knew exactly what she was entitled to and how to get more than her fair share. The house, which we had bought together and renovated over the years, had to be sold. Cecilia got 60% of the proceeds because she had contributed more to the household and had been financially responsible, while I was wasting money on my affair. She also got the better car, most of our furniture, and even our dog Max. When I protested about the dog, her lawyer argued that I had abandoned my responsibilities as a pet owner during my affair and that Max would be better off with Cecilia. 6 months after that terrible night when she caught me with Jennifer, I was living in a small apartment across town, working a job where I was no longer respected, and eating dinner alone every night. I had lost my wife, my home, most of my possessions, my social circle, and the respect of my family. But Cecilia still wasn't finished with me. The final blow came when I learned that she had been documenting everything about our divorce and my affair online. She had started a blog called Surviving Betrayal, where she chronicled her journey from devoted wife to empowered divorcee. She never used my real name, but anyone who knew us could easily identify me as the cheating husband in her stories. Her blog became popular, especially among other women who had been cheated on. She gained thousands of followers who supported her and villainized me. She wrote detailed posts about the signs of infidelity, how to gather evidence of cheating, and how to protect yourself financially during a divorce. In her posts, I wasn't just a cheating husband. I was a master manipulator who had gaslighted her for years, making her doubt her own instincts while I carried on my affair. According to her narrative, I had been emotionally abusive, financially irresponsible, and completely lacking in empathy. She shared screenshots of text messages between us during the divorce proceedings, always with my name blacked out but with enough context that people could see how unreasonable and selfish I was being. She made me look like someone who was trying to take advantage of her generosity and kindness. The blog posts were shared on social media and some of them went viral. I started getting messages from strangers who had read her story and wanted to tell me what a terrible person I was. Some people even found my social media accounts and left nasty comments about my character. I tried to defend myself online, but every time I posted something, it was screenshot and shared on Cecilia's blog as evidence of my continued manipulation and inability to take responsibility for my actions. Everything I said was twisted and used against me. The worst part was that some of what she wrote was true. I had cheated on her. I had lied to her. I had broken our vows and destroyed our marriage. But she had taken those facts and woven them into a story that made me into a monster, while she was the innocent victim who had done everything right. A year after our divorce was finalized, I was a completely different person than I had been before. I was isolated, financially struggling, and emotionally devastated. I had learned the hard way that when you betray someone who loves you, they don't just walk away. Sometimes they make sure you pay for it in every possible way. Cecilia had moved on to a new life, a new relationship, and a successful blog that was helping other women navigate betrayal and divorce. She had turned her pain into purpose and her tragedy into triumph. Meanwhile, I was still picking up the pieces of the life I had destroyed. I realized that what Cecilia had done wasn't just revenge. It was a masterclass in how to completely dismantle someone's life when they hurt you. She had been strategic, patient, and thorough in her approach. She hadn't just ended our marriage, she had ended my old life entirely. Looking back now, I understand that I deserved consequences for my actions. But I never imagined that those consequences would be so comprehensive and devastating. Cecilia had shown me that hell hath no fury like a woman scorned, especially when that woman is intelligent, resourceful, and has nothing left to lose. The affair with Jennifer, which had seemed so important and meaningful at the time, now felt like the most expensive mistake of my life. A few months of stolen moments had cost me everything I had built over decades. 2 years later, I'm still rebuilding. I've moved to a different city, started a new job, and slowly begun to repair some of the relationships that Cecilia's campaign had damaged. But the scars remain, and I know that some bridges can never be rebuilt. I sometimes wonder if Cecilia ever thinks about the completeness of her revenge, whether she feels satisfied with how thoroughly she destroyed my life. But then I remember the look in her eyes that night when she caught me with Jennifer, cold, calculating, and absolutely certain of what she needed to do. She had loved me once, genuinely and completely. And when I betrayed that love, she made sure I understood exactly what I had lost and exactly what it cost to break the heart of someone who had given you everything. Thank you for watching this video. I see that 99% of you are still watching videos without subscribing to the channel. Perhaps YouTube will no longer offer videos from this channel in the future, so I recommend subscribing. This will also allow me to see what stories you are interested in, which will motivate me to release new videos. Also, keep writing in the comments what stories you would like to hear. I try to read all the comments and choose topics for videos that appeal to the maximum number of subscribers. Now you have a playlist on your screen where you can find more stories that were released before you found this channel. You can also go to the channel and watch them there.